History will tell us about a guy who, with the hammer of justice, will crush evil that bypasses taxes. It all started a little unexpectedly for the main character. At one point, he began to see numbers above the heads of other people. Someone might have assumed that the guy became the owner of the Death Note, but everything was much more interesting. The numbers were not overall people, so it took a lot of time to figure out what they were talking about. There was only one obvious fact. No one except the main character is able to see them. Each digit in the number was vague and imprecise, as if subject to distortion. But over time, everything changed. The young man tried countless times to unravel the secret meaning and nature of his power, but failed. The numbers could mean anything: strength, lifespan, amount of money, or the equivalent amount of knowledge. The more often this happened, the higher the guy's confidence was that he was gradually becoming insane. The solution was simple: just ignore these meanings and move on with your life. At least that's what the main character decided. However, life was not going to give the young man such an opportunity. One day, he encountered something he didn't even know about. The main character was not lucky enough to catch Hyun's quarrel and departure from his family. The guy's mother was in tears and did not know what to do. The man considered his main mistake to be that he decided to become part of their family in the first place, warning him that he should not be stopped. This news greatly affected the main character. It was difficult to believe that Hyun was leaving, probably forever. The gradually closing door resonated inside both the guy's mother and himself. The life of the main character was quite bad. Since childhood, he tried to earn money to help his mother. He needed a lot of money, of course, not only for the woman but also for his own expenses, so the guy worked full-time. In his free time, the main character studied hard, hoping to someday change this world or at least his life. Diligence really paid off because the young man managed to get a position in a well-known company. But a difficult path lay ahead for the young man. Unsuccessful relationships and other troubles awaited him just around the next corner. Even though the guy didn't plan to give up his personal boundaries, there were many who tried to become friends with him. One day while working, the young man noticed that familiar numbers appeared in Excel. The world could not joke about him like that. Having decided to clarify whether he had done his job correctly, the main character turned to his manager. Shin Jae-hyun noticed that the company was evading taxes, and his boss asked him not to talk about it. Having received such an answer, numbers appeared before the guy's eyes, like damage numbers from some MMO. At that very moment, one name popped into his head, the name of Managing Director Young Hyo-jung. The amount that the program gave out and the number above the head of the main boss coincided. Jae-han finally answered his question. The manager did not understand the employee's diligence, warning him that it was better not to get involved in this matter. Otherwise, you would end up with problems. The young man understood that not everything is fair in this world, but at that moment, a realization came to him. This crossroads of decisions greatly worried the main character, because right now his fate for the near future was being decided. Should we remain those who hold this system on our shoulders, turning a blind eye to what is happening, or will it become the hammer of punishment? Jae-han did not think about this issue for a long time, telling in the right place who was breaking the law and how. As soon as the managing director paid his bills, the number above his head instantly disappeared. As a result, the meaning of the numbers and the method of destroying them was finally found. Surprisingly, they meant the amount of the unpaid debt. If you choose a superpower, then the main character would like to shoot lasers from his eyes or release strong claws from his fists. It seemed that the director also understood who exactly had handed him over to the police. He cast a grinning glance towards the young man. It was obvious to everyone, even though the man was a terrible person, he did not plan to leave this path. After some time, the young man was called to the manager. He was politely informed that he was now unemployed again. Behind Shin Jae-hyun's back, they called him a traitor, an informer, and even a rat. It was obvious to everyone who had betrayed the company. Even if the price for defending justice was high, the guy could find a job in another field, and perhaps he should have used his power. He was amazed at how many criminals in his world avoided paying taxes. He saw each of them and knew them by sight. The young man decided to find himself a stable job, namely to become an official. The problem is not in the country, but in those who live in it. It was necessary to clean out all this filth, finding a much more favorable path for development. Now the main character has finally decided that from this day on, his ability will become a gift that will help the world become a better place. To turn all these numbers into nothing, following this path, he is ready to go even further than the Elric brothers in search of the Philosopher's Stone. A hunter of thieves and other violators, this is exactly the nickname that will be attached to the main character several years later. The world is a rather complex thing, but there are several truly fair things in it, for example, the law. The second indestructible champion of justice was gravity, which never betrays itself and always works according to the rules. And also the third thing that can suppress other injustices, money is sometimes more important than even our own lives. A special ability allowed the young man to quickly determine who exactly was guilty. He was like an infallible judge. Having numbers displayed above people's heads and being able to see them won't change the fact that people buy Bentleys but don't want to pay tax. The more famous and rich a person was, the more dark stories there were in his life and the higher the number itself. Usually everything happened this way. Everyone believes that they cheated the system and will never be caught for it. The nature of the ability was still a mystery, but its accuracy was not in doubt. Having received an answer to the questions that had tormented him for so long, Jaehan decided to rid this world of injustice. But it was necessary to think through everything carefully, as well as perform some preparatory steps. The first stage was to lay down the written examination for the 7th grade civil servant. Hard study, confidence, and firm principles allowed the guy to easily pass this exam. Having completed the task, the young man wanted to check his answers with others, but suddenly noticed a large number of missing answers. The number was unknown, so the young man checked his messages. His mother, Myung-ja Lee, was taken to the emergency room. The entire treatment cost about $600. The amount was not high, but it was problematic to pay for it at once. Therefore, the main character asked to be given an installment plan for 6 months so that he could gradually pay off the bill. But even so, paying $100 a month was too expensive for the young man. Now he didn't have that kind of money, so that the woman would not worry. Our Jaehyun took the payment himself, asking his mother not to worry. Returning home, the guy talked about how his exam went. He did everything possible, there was no need to worry. Even though the first stage should have gone well, there was an interview ahead and it was too early to relax. In addition to the existing problems, insurance has also been added because for non-payment it will no longer cover the treatment. However, the young man was sure that his mother needed premium class insurance. All that was left was to find the money. The main character tried to hide all the bills from his mother, trying to protect her from unnecessary worries, but the woman was persistent. As soon as Myung-ja Lee saw the letter, she asked her son not to overdo it, promising to correct the situation on his own. The understanding that things couldn't continue like this had stayed with the guy ever since the hospital. He had to do something. The young man wanted to quit school and go to work to pay bills and improve their quality of life. However, the woman could not allow the guy to take all this on herself. Her father and brother left them and now her mother is worried. She promised herself that she would never cause problems for her children in the future, much less drag them down. The constant need for money and fear due to its lack, all this really bothered the main character. Since you can't make money in this world by farming monsters, sometimes you have to overcome your pride. The young man decided to turn to his older brother, who had not lived with them for a long time and did not maintain any relationship. Han did not want to communicate with the younger one, reminding him that he told him to forget this number forever. Then the guy described the situation. But our older brother Jaehyun hardly cared about his mother's condition. He said goodbye, saying that he had a meeting. Their conversation was quite rude. The man asked why the main character doesn't solve his problems on his own. The older brother suggested that the boy was only using his mother's condition as an excuse to get money. Then the man did not plan to continue the conversation. He simply hung up, reminding him that they were no longer a family. Everyone around seemed happy. The sun was setting, but Jaehyun didn't have time for that. He was busy studying. Of course, this is not a comprehension of the Warhammer plot, but it is an equally important activity that should pay off in the future. Returning home in the dark, the main character did not stop thinking about how to answer the questions. No one wanted to be a loser, but overcoming these difficulties was beyond Jaehyun's capabilities. The main character is tired of everything that he has to deal with just to maintain a normal standard of living. This was too much for him, and he wanted to finish his business once and for all. His heart was beating fast. However, the young man was unable to cope even with this. He considered himself a coward because he could not even run away. Believing all his life that hard work would help him reach the top, the guy worked on himself around the clock. But in the end, he can't even pay for his own mother's treatment, let alone help her pay the bills. A man with golden eyes and blonde hair stopped the guy from doing the wrong thing. He wanted to hear the guy's story. The man saw no point in throwing garbage into the water, especially if you are a future civil servant. The book Jaehyun held in his hands said that he studied taxes and related issues. However, the guy had only just begun to move in this direction. Then the stranger suggested that the young man just wanted to let off steam. The appearance of the man was definitely not an accident. He was wearing a stylish and fitting suit and an expensive watch. The stranger's wealth made the young man doubt, and he looked above his head, but it was empty. The fact that the man standing in front of him was not a tax fraud greatly surprised the protagonist. The stranger asked him to express what was bothering the main character, and if not, then he would simply move on. Then the main character spoke about everything that had bothered him for so long and kept him from living in peace, about how everyone around him enjoyed the ups and occasional downs, but each time he had to fall lower and lower. However, thinking that the world is unfair just because of your failures is a little stupid, the stranger said that he was disappointed. The guy did not understand, even if his situation was not the worst, but still, he would face a crime because of his help in finding the culprit. The guy's words interested the man. There was something pure and fair in them, so it seemed to the blonde. However, the main character could not hold back his tears, and then explained the situation, saying that he was fired for denouncing the vice president. The young man was born with low luck. At least he thought so. The build for luck and agility suited Sanrak, but not Jaehan. In a fit of despair, the main character doubted the principles he followed. He no longer believed in the power of the law. Then the stranger decided to clarify whether the guy wanted to solve this problem by becoming an official of their country. The guy knew the other side of this false justice, so he didn't want to just wait. He needed solutions. A little later, the stranger again turned to the guy with a question whether he was sure that injustice was being destroyed in this way. Having received no answer, the man asked the guy to imagine that he was already an authoritative collector and had learned about a superior person. I learned a terrible secret, and if the main character does not tell about it, this mystery will remain unsolved for the rest of his life. The stranger understood from the guy's words that he was fired for denouncing his manager, so he would do the same again. Holding his breath and calming down a little, Jae-hyun said about his favorite quote, "The blade of justice is blind." After another short pause, he added, "It doesn't matter who it is, the offender must be punished." The young man seemed very intriguing to the man, so he handed him his business card. "To see this world for real, you need to get no less real experience," said the blonde. Thinking about whether the boy has everything in him to become this blade of justice, the man meets again. He wanted to see if the guy could become a man of his word, overcome temporary difficulties, and become a better person. The man handed over a piece of paper with the name, phone number, and address of the accounting department. He wanted the guy to gain experience. The stranger said that the indicated number was his personal one. He would help the guy only once, so he could call at any time. Not understanding why the young man was receiving such significant support, he was confused. The man simply decided to show that there is good. The main character, realizing how great a service they had done him, promised to repay his kindness someday. Before the stranger left in his car, Jaehan decided to find out if he was being lured into a financial pyramid. This answer surprised and amused the man. He liked the suspicion of his new acquaintance. The blonde said that it was not necessary to accept his help, but asked to remember his words because it might help someday. Reflecting on what had happened, the guy could not understand whether he had just opened a deal with the devil or an angel. The guy's view of the current situation interested the blonde, but he understood that the main character knew too little right now. The young man's hard work continued, constant training, and that incident on the bridge gave Jaehan confidence in his work. In the mornings he studied, listened to lectures, and diligently took notes, and in the afternoon he went to work in the office. The young man's work was quite simple, but it was not this experience that was of particular value, but the words that he heard. Hardly anyone perceived the quiet young man as a threat. All the secrets and sins of the leadership gradually came out of them. After some time, the guy finally got to the interview. He was faced with the final question. He was asked what kind of civil servant the boy wanted to become. His abilities could not be called ordinary. In addition, the answer to this question had been in the guy's head for a long time. He answered clearly and without any doubt. Returning home, the guy listened to his mother's complaint that he had not followed up on the delivery of milk. However, now he was incredibly happy about what happened, because based on the results of the interview, they decided to hire him. It was not easy for both Jaehyun and his mother to believe, but he got a position in the office in Seoul. The trial period went well. In such happy moments, the guy feels like someone is looking out for him. After so much time, the main character did not stop thinking about the person who helped him, as well as about his words. Perhaps this particular stranger is his guardian angel, then everything would seem logical. Having reached this level, the young man had no plans to stop. The future of Korea looked blindingly bright. However, there was a lot of work to be done. It was worth starting with the children receiving payments from rental housing. This happens because their parents are diligently trying to bypass the tax system. There are more than 2,000 such families. There are hardly so many teenage businessmen in this country. Everything was obvious, but they turned a blind eye to it for so long. The main character was sure that he would not allow this closed loop to be used to circumvent the law. The numbers flashing before the young man's eyes seemed to be talking to him. They were a sight showing who the hand of the law would punish next. The income tax department was where people worked hard, getting enough sleep during their lunch breaks. However, upon completion, the manager woke everyone up, reminding them that work must be continued. The boss himself could hardly boast of such enthusiasm in the process. Sitting down at his place, he diligently began to look for manicure scissors. The guy handled the workload well, so as soon as Manager Park returned to his desk, Jae-hyun was already with him. He noticed one large business owned by a 12-year-old child, but the boss did not see this as a problem. The guy wanted to get permission to start a tax investigation because the degree of income did not converge much. When the boss decides to clarify this issue, the guy explained in detail what exactly he suspects this business of doing. The manager insisted that his subordinate move on to more important matters rather than chasing after something like this. The boss's insistence seemed suspicious to the guy. He was too actively asking not to pay attention to this matter. The man explained that it was not their job. For this reason, they should have been engaged in tasks of a different kind. The manager's attitude was tactless. He pointed out to the newcomer the lack of experience in his career, which could become an argument. The man's answer remained unchanged. Then the inspector was called aside by a woman working with him. She clarified the name, and when everything came together, she asked me to simply put things aside if they asked for it. The girl also said that the manager and their boss get along well with the owners, so they help them save money. The colleague's suggestion to turn a blind eye to this situation turned out to be too disgusting for the guy. In order to somehow change the situation, the young man turned to everyone who was in the office and asked why they studied so much. It was wrong to give the opportunity to be cunning to some and to punish others for it. The guy continued to be perplexed while adjusting his hairstyle. Everyone around began to whisper, trying to understand who exactly his boss was and how long he had been working in this position. Then the manager intervened, clearly starting a conflict with the main character, but he still did not know what would happen. While the head of the department was expressing his opinion, he added that if the guy doesn't like something, he can leave. The main character did not plan to endure this, so he calmly turned around and walked out the door. Remembering the man's words, the young man dialed the number he had written down on a small piece of paper, realizing that this was his chance. The stranger was surprised how relatively quickly Jae-hyun needed his help. The guy wanted to clarify how much help he could have. Then the young man briefly explained the situation and explained exactly what measures were required in order to catch the criminals. After listening to everything the guy said, the stranger with blonde hair reminded him that this was the only chance to get his help. The confidence and evil response of the protagonist made his friend laugh even more, because his infusion was something new. Having given instructions to do what the young man considered necessary, the blonde promised that no one would henceforth stand in the guy's way. A short time later, Jae-hyun returned to work and took up the very business that was bothering him. There is a knock on the door and the boss runs to the main character's desk, as if he is Sonic, and the treasured rings are ahead. He was interested in whether the young man called to this place or not. Jae-hyun admitted without a shadow of a doubt that it was him. Such impudence amazed the bespectacled man. He did not expect that the newcomer would show such resistance. The guy also asked the manager to leave, because his presence greatly interfered with the duties assigned to the guy. While the boss was shouting at the entire department, not understanding who hired him, his colleagues tried to convince Jae-hyun to apologize. The confrontation with the manager reached its climax, but before the man could do anything, someone entered the office building. It was the director of the company. He was interested in why everyone was not sitting at work, although more than an hour had already passed since the lunch break. Along with the head, the manager's partner also came to help circumvent the law. Everyone should have continued working. In addition, Sungwon Heo asked if there was some kind of conflict because he heard scolding before he opened the doors. Then the manager got out of it, saying that everything was fine. But that's what the director needed. He called the two of them to his place. Before ending the careers of two people who allowed themselves too much, Heo called out the main character. The situation seemed tense, so the young man was a little uneasy, but introduced himself to the higher authorities. The gray-haired man was very pleased because he would be able to retire without worrying about the company. None of the colleagues understood what the director was talking about, and besides, what the main character had to do with it. The guy himself was not against taking the place of the head, but only if he himself had nothing to hide before the law. The old man laughed a lot at this reaction. The condition was interesting. The manager in the background was already mentally forging the suitcases. The man was in no hurry to deny his guilt, but it was clearly cleaner than that of those who stood behind him. Before giving any answer, the man took them to his office, where he would outline the situation. When all the executives left the office, an angry silence reigned. No one except Jae-hyun understood what was happening. Only one guy continued to quickly type on the keys, fulfilling his daily quota. Everyone watched in amazement as the young man did his job. No one could understand who this guy was. The accountant going to the department was quite joyful, because in 20 years of work, such calls did not foretell anything bad. The same happy man entered the office, where the director and accomplices with whom they evaded taxes were waiting for him. However, as soon as he went inside, the guy realized that in front of the office there was an inscription, "Abandon hope, all who enter here." The man was worried about the recalculation of income that their company might assign, but that wasn't quite the case. Things were much worse. The accountant, having heard the story, could not understand how they were upset by such a newcomer to the business. It was obvious that there were large forces behind the guy. If they knew this earlier, perhaps they would have been able to avoid trouble. The guy went straight to the prosecutor's office. This shocked the guest because it is unlikely that an ordinary person would do such a thing. The director conveyed the decree to all managers. Shin Jae-hyun has the right to do what he sees fit and no one should interfere with him. The scammers did not expect how quickly everything could change at the will of one person. They were not at all ready for change. The general director of the central headquarters himself gave the order, which means there is no way to ignore it. An accountant from that same company went on tilt as soon as he read the document left behind. As soon as the guy told the client about the situation, he intended to end the meeting because he still had work. If a man has nothing to add, then he should have figured out what to do and how to pay as soon as possible. Even though the person standing in front of him was disgusting, as he thought, the main character was courteous and polite. Having completed his first case of embezzlement of funds, Jae-hee, as he had already gotten used to it, reached up. Since now no one can stop the young man, he will be able to complete the task very soon, but the feeling of anxiety did not go away. This time everything went well, but whether it will be like this in the future or this is a one-time event, Jaehan did not know the answer. But as soon as he left the office, he noticed a familiar face in the parking lot. The blonde man was waving at him from the salon. The meeting may have been unexpected, but the main character was glad to see his savior. He offered to have dinner. The guy decided to ask one question right away. He couldn't understand why he had received such an honor, but the blonde just wanted to talk. It may not look like it, but the stranger is quite a busy man, and he didn't wait for the guy for 10 minutes. Then the guy asked why the man was trying so hard for him. He was also interested in where they were going. The blonde reminded the guy that he had already helped him out twice, so why not just trust him? The location they found themselves in was simply incredible. The bright lights and traditional style complemented each other perfectly. The food that was served to the table today was just a dream for Jae-hee. He saw it on the internet, but he was trying it for the first time. The man asked not to worry about anything and enjoy it, because this was just the beginning of their cooperation. Having thanked his benefactor, the guy began to eat, while thinking about what else this wonderful man had in store. The young man's happiness knew no bounds. The man decided to start while they were having a meal, hoping that the interlocutor would not mind. The theory of the boss of the man he works for now implies opportunity. Freedom shows a real person. Given the chance of his life, the protagonist might have wished for success, fame, money, or anything else, but he was true to himself. The guy's caution was extremely high. A stumble at the initial stages of his career is doubly dangerous. The blonde noted that for such an extremely calculating person, the call happened somehow too soon. It doesn't take a genius to understand how different their situations are. One call changed everything radically. In addition, earlier the guy promised to someday repay his savior. These were not just words. Then, raising his glass, the man finally introduced himself. His name is Song-Yun Lee, and he is the head of the tax department. Moreover, the blonde was the boss of not just any place, but Samson, the tax service. Because of this, he even fell. The place where Song-Yun Lee worked exists next to the most famous offices in the world, even not being inferior to them in glory. Then there was only one question left. How could the head of the department make a call to the director, albeit of a less prestigious department? Someone was supposed to join them. An unknown man asked to apologize for being late. There were traffic jams. The general director of the tax service, Samson, came into their room. It was she who answered that question. The guy's fame quickly reached the top. He didn't have to get up. It looks like the head of the region turned out to be a cheerful guy. The boy introduced himself, but the thought that he didn't belong here and that it could probably be a trap didn't leave his head. As soon as the CEO came in, Sung-Kyun Lee left, leaving the main character and his highest management alone. The guy thought he should leave too, but the man asked him to make himself comfortable. The awkward silence ended the moment the man asked for a drink. There was no reason to refuse this, and besides, the excitement still did not go away. Time is a rather valuable resource, and there was no point in wasting it now. Therefore, the man immediately decided to get down to business, asking if the guy would become his blade, as if he were the god Yado. The question posed now echoed in Jae-hee's head. He was ashamed and interested at the same time. Pulling himself together, the main character clarified what exactly it means to become a blade in the director's understanding. Chi-ho-min was the general director of a research bureau, an extremely high position. Of course, this is just an offer and you can refuse it. The young man continued to look for pitfalls in what was happening. However, the man assured that there was no catch in this deal. It just happened that he liked the guy. Before giving his answer, the main character asked Chi-ho-min if he had any idea who the guy was. The answer was simple. These were the words of the guy that he said shortly before this incident. He wants to catch scammers. And this is exactly what Jae-hyun is required to do as a blade, to catch evil and chain it in hell. Even though the man's analogy was simple, he said the right things, which found a response in the young man's heart. Realizing how much responsibility can become a part of a guy's life, he tried to test the attitude of his future boss. The man did not immediately understand what was being said. Then the main character explained that someday an investigation might begin in this department. Even if this was a sad outcome, even the general director could not influence it. Justice will be restored. Realizing that he would never have an opportunity better than this again in his life, the guy thought about the offer one last time. The result left Chi-ho-min satisfied, because Jae-hyun accepted the offer as long as he can do what he thinks is right. For the first time, while the main character does not have much experience, he should start his journey from the Byumsun office. Regardless of who stands in front of the guy, his task is to be a faithful dog who looks for the offender and punishes him. Gradually, the dark colors of the young man's life began to be diluted with something lighter, because he began to sow justice. The Bomsang tax office was not as prestigious as the Samson office, but it was also a cool place. As soon as the main character returned to work, everyone in the area began to whisper, not understanding why he came. It was sad to realize that at 30, the guy was at greater risk than ever of becoming an office outcast. Although this was sad in theory, Jae-han himself was more than happy with everything and continued working. Any official like the main character would kill for the opportunity to have connections with such big fish. Those whom the young man had previously denounced were not very happy to see him in the office again. Department head Kim was the first to approach. The guy's spider sense worked for good reason. The man was definitely acting too aggressively. But before the intruder could do anything, Kim's colleague came to Byumsun's office. Department head of the tax service, Yongo Ham, he called Kim a disgrace to their office and asked him not to interfere with others' work. It was a real miracle that the manager and department head didn't end up behind the boat, considering how much they stumbled. However, the cheerful guy then changed his tune and explained to his colleague that it was because of people like him that they all had such a reputation. This hangman definitely knew how to handle Kim. He quickly took him aside so that he would not cause trouble to others. He also turned to the main character, asking him to give him some time so they could talk. The man, definitely reminiscent of the Mike guy vibe, invited the young man into the break room. This shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. To start the conversation right away, the man treated the talented worker to sweets. The man's department deals with slightly different issues, but the young man wanted to send something to it. This was indeed the case, because the company that the boss did not want to check yesterday is definitely evading taxes. Based on financial history, the structure, as well as the place itself, is worth at least $950,000, and the owner is 12 years old. It seemed like the local version of the evergreen spirit of youth was on the main character's side, so it wasn't bad. After which, having found points of agreement, the man gave Jae-hyun the financial history of the Imsun shopping center. According to these data, the owners of the building took out a huge loan, added funds and used them to buy all the property. Now it was clear where the money came from, but something in this story greatly embarrassed the guy. The guy's first guess turned out to be wrong, which the man reported. Jae-hyun was missing something. Then the guy suggested that his parents took out a loan against collateral and bought a shopping center for the same money. This time the answer was correct. Such a brazen game with the laws infuriated the young man. He was ready to tear and throw. The main character already wanted to go and justify the title of the story, but his new friend stopped him from rash actions. Then the man reminded of the existence of burdensome gifts, which imply the transfer of everything along with debts. The hint was indeed worthwhile. The young man finally noticed what he had been missing all this time. If you just give someone that much money as a gift, it will be taxable. In the first case, the debt for the gift is very large and receiving it along with the gift is quite unpleasant. But burdening the debt is a slightly different event, allowing you to transfer the debt, which will significantly reduce the payment. At the same time, the method used by Eason was legal. The man asked his colleague not to get too upset. There was one way to hold people accountable, but the young man would have to work for it. The morning of this day was quite productive, but it could not be compared with what was to be done during the day. A man with a cool tie was talking to someone about the main character. Surprised by his approach, the guy decided to find the answer himself. He was just leaving the building, so the good man called him over so they could talk a little again. The guy's confident gait could even deceive someone. He had confidence and hope like a pro. When the guy got into the car, the man asked if they had any chance of doing this. Then, after waiting a little, the young man replied that in general he understood the essence, so he had already found several options. By transferring property to children, parents can significantly reduce the tax they pay. However, according to the bank's report, the amount of debt still must be repaid in full, so they are required to pay about $750,000. Logically, the owner should return the money, but since he is not yet an adult, this must be done by the parents. The main character's thoughts have indeed chosen the right direction, but that's not all he needs. Before Jae-hyun could answer this question, they had already reached their destination. Surprisingly, they arrived at Imsun Corp, and the man also shared the bank book of that general's child. Those who seriously plan to bypass the system find accomplices in its heart, so ironclad evidence is always needed. The guys confidently walked inside, greeting everyone who was inside. They said that they came from Byumsun's office. Everyone was greatly surprised by such a spectacular appearance, because no one expected to see the main character here. The guy ignored all their complaints, and then suggested that they prepare, because in this fight they were about to miss a right hook. The man sitting next to the already familiar employees was interested in the guy, because he added a lot of things to do. The young man and his eternally young partner were not going to leave empty-handed. They offered to talk about this problem. The big shot warned the boys they shouldn't speak unless they were prepared to face dire consequences. The young man did not plan to panic or bargain. He made it clear that he would talk as much as he wanted. Then he handed an envelope with interesting information to the gray-haired man, but he didn't even plan to look. An accurate joke about the school bell and the main instigator of the riots had to squeeze the folder in his hands. This man was the father of the girl in whose name the building and land were registered, and he began to threaten the employees. The voiced debt seemed ridiculous to the old man. Then the guy asked whether the man expected to see a larger amount there. This is truly outrageous because if you believe the guy's eyes, the man's debt exceeded $1 billion. Like a snake, the gray-haired man began to crawl forward using the already stated arguments as an excuse. The main character began to set a trap, which the unreasonable grandfather would later fall into because he doesn't know much. The man's confidence was as great as Goku's power, but the guy asked if he really wouldn't have to pay. As if Jaehyun didn't know the words fear or excitement, he directly spoke about the bank statement without any doubt. In order for even the stupidest to understand accurately, the young man began to sort out all the financial frauds. If the debt was $750,000, then the low profit seemed more than logical, because the loan was constantly being repaid. It was not the gentlemen who were in such a hurry and rejoiced at their victory that the main character had to ask them to be a little slower. It was for this reason, which was given by department head Kim, that Jaehyun took another interesting document with him. The grandfather was so confident in his plan that he did not even imagine what object could block the movement of this fraud. However, data from the second bank book of the man's daughter said that the indicated amount was to be paid for a year, not a month. The man's entire circuit was covered with a tinfoil cap, so he had no choice but to remain silent. The main character will give time to explain himself to the father of the girl who owns the company, but he hardly has any chance. The snake that had just been at Jaehyun's neck practically lost its own head. An argument began between the counterfeiters because the act on the part of the gray-haired man was truly stupid. The main character's partner congratulated him on the fact that all the cards in his hand were played correctly. This trio became so depressed, they were ready to start a fight. But even so, the boy offered to continue his story. No one tried to justify himself, so the guy charges tax payments in full as it should have been. The gray-haired man planned to turn to someone of a higher level. He hoped to teach the main character a lesson. The first case turned out to be quite simple. But did it end there, or was it just a lost battle? A few minutes later, the call was answered. The grandfather immediately began to be polite, trying to get cover. Chief guy from the police station, the guys really hoped that he would help them settle this matter. The man spoke about the limitation in terms of cooperation with the head of the department, Kim, so now another person is needed to solve it. The one who the grandfather called said only that he had the wrong number. The man did not like this behavior very much. At this moment, it became obvious to everyone that the last hope had just burned out, and the rest of the group began to worry. An SMS came to the guy's phone. It was Song-Yun Lee. He said that the investigator from the prosecutor's office would remain in their office today. Finally, the young man knew that taste when there is more strength on your side than on the enemy's side. This sweet taste of victory even inspired his partner to say a few words, before which he had been framed by color. Stopping now would be too stupid. It would be worth taking full advantage of the situation. The man was asked to tell his daughter that they were looking forward to the appointed payments. The sooner the better. Realizing the hopelessness of the situation, the gray-haired grandfather handed an envelope with several $100,000 directly to the main character. Without any doubt, the money ended up in the hands of the young man. The grandfather thought that he had finally won. But alas, our Jaehyun simply tore the envelope, not understanding what the gray-haired man was even thinking about, although it was funny to see the villain's despair. If such money was on hand, the man should quickly pay taxes and use it only for this. The guy's persistence and his strong steel-like principles seemed to the scammer something crazy and unreal. A tax investigation will soon be conducted, and besides, the man should have come up with excuses for the prosecutor general. At this moment, the man finally realized that in this battle, he had suffered a crushing defeat. Thunder and lightning danced around the protagonist's aura before erasing the amount written above the man's head. The packing of the attackers was in full swing. All personal belongings were collected and will be sent for examination. The manager and head of the department hoped that they would be given a less serious punishment since this was their first crime. A few minutes later, the two dissatisfied people were taken out in handcuffs. They will soon be convicted to the fullest extent of the law. Other officials began to wonder how government employees could do such a thing. Before the main character could return to work and then have lunch while watching our videos, the director called him. Like the man with the beautiful tie, the director gave Jaehyun some candy before starting the conversation. Apparently, a lot of people in this office love lollipops because they give him a second one. It looks a little strange, but it's cool. The head of the department, Ham, was sitting inside. He said that he was very surprised at how the guy acted. He looked more like a veteran. The story of Kim and Imson Corp began immediately after he was hired as a department head. This villain ruined many promising inspectors, and almost no one could find justice for him. The praise and recognition of the young man's work greatly embarrassed him, because he had never encountered such an experience before. The director added that, unfortunately, there are now many people among officials with the same thoughts and intentions. For this reason, after thinking about everything that was happening, the head of the department, Ham, and the director himself decided to connect with those who are behind the guy. The young man did not quite understand what this meant, because they were not avatars to make friends in this way, but he was flattered. Then the main character told how hard he worked to get to this place and talked about his motivation. However, in response to this, the director only said that the desire to help people is what makes the young man special. Section Chief Khan also chimed in, saying how difficult it can sometimes be to fight for justice in their case. The whole point of the conversation was to give the young talent confidence in his abilities. The director and Khan promised to help. With a wide smile, Jae-hun warned that when he takes everyone seriously, things will get really dirty. In order to somehow help the budding protagonist, the director asked in which department he would like to work. We are transported forward some time. The guy became a member of the investigative department, and his boss stood in front of him. Investigator Myung-Yun Kim radiated an incredibly dark aura. His very presence began to put pressure on everyone. To check whether the man could be trusted, the main character checked whether he had a number above his head. Our Jae-han was new to investigative work, so he had a lot to learn, including special skills. But having said this, Kim immediately took the boy to the real deal. He had a visitor and she wanted to report on the evasion. Reporting someone's financial fraud can be very costly, so the investigations division provides protection. Of course, there is a condition. The process must be recorded from beginning to end, with all the details relating to the case. The recording began, and the only thing in the young man's head was that thanks to this opportunity, he would be able to prove himself. The hunt for tax fraudsters is declared open. The guy took his blade and was ready to strike according to the wishes of the general director. The woman was an ordinary grocery store employee. She assumed that their boss might resort to such antics. Briefly explaining the suspicious aspects, she added that she had no personal motives. Often people report someone for revenge, but regardless of the reason, each report should be investigated. The store employed from 12 to 15 people, but payments were always made late. The investigator suggested that perhaps the boss did not have enough cash, but the woman saw how he kept it in the safe. The woman who came even had evidence. She took a photo of the man putting cash there. The picture indeed showed a large amount of money. Gold bars were now also stored on the top shelf. There shouldn't be any problems with payments, especially considering the entire amount collected there. There were no more photographs. The woman was very worried that she would be discovered, so she did not take any risks. Most of their clients come more prepared, and besides, her story seems uncertain. The head of the department thanked the woman for her appeal, after which the boss and the main character left the room. Kim wondered if everything became clear to the guy when he finally encountered the process on his own. Everything that happened was carried out according to the protocol, so it was clear what exactly to do, but how it would end. The investigation department is very different from others. Here the file given to you is only yours. Others do not know about it. The only one who monitors everyone at once is the head of the department himself. Talk about any changes or suspicions only to him. Usually during investigations, investigators move in pairs like in the anti-ghoul department, but there are too few people. The main character did not mind working alone, but he did not suspect that he would be involved in the investigation so quickly. The young man was a little doubtful, because this was the first working day in a new position and there was practically no preparation. And the fact that now Jae-hyun is going to work alone only added fuel to the fire, because he was afraid of making a mistake. Sometime later, our boy found himself in the right place, seemingly an ordinary supermarket. But what secrets does it keep? As soon as the young man went inside, he noticed something strange. The prices were quite normal, but the behavior of the employees. One of them shouted at the visitor for picking up the product to inspect it before purchasing. When the teenager asked why the cost of paying by card was higher than the cost of paying in cash, the man was rude to him. The cash price was too low compared to what you had to pay for a non-cash payment. The cost of goods in the store was constantly falling, so competitors were unhappy with this. It's not easy to compete with someone whose strategy is also ridiculous. But how does a man get $300,000 in debt? The freedom of action was amazing, but it was definitely not worth going into this establishment without a well-thought-out plan. Sitting in the park in the evening and eating a delicious sandwich, the main character talked about what happened and how to find evidence. Even though the young man's superpower allowed him to see the exact amount of debt, this cannot be used as an argument. The investigation turned out to be not such a simple task. You need to collect evidence and then issue an invoice. A call was received on the guy's phone. He was addressed as a government employee, but he did not know this person. The stranger asked him where the guy was, But before our protagonist could answer, the mysterious man said that he saw the guy. A few meters away from Jae-hyun, a guy named Manhwa, a level 8 employee in the investigation department, stopped. The head of the department contacted him, so he decided to pick up the guy. He was ready to give him a ride. However, why a bicycle was chosen as a means of transportation was unclear. Then Voss explained that he had forgotten the car keys. The trip to the office was relatively quick, but with the bike they can get there in a few minutes. In addition, the main character forgot the financial report in the office, so out of the kindness of their hearts, they brought it to him. The income denunciation also aroused the guy's interest, because according to the data, the annual discount on the card is $100,000. With only $30,000 in cash, the owner practically forces everyone to pay in cash. Without any doubt, one could say that the man was understating his income. Voss was surprised because Jae-hyun did not look like a newbie. It sounded as if the main character now had some important information. The new acquaintance of the main character was eager to act. The next day, the store owner counted the cash he earned while humming a tune. One of the saleswomen knocked on his office. She wanted to talk about his salary and she had some questions. A man once told a woman that after a few months of work, he would start paying her the minimum amount. The owner was surprised. The trial period ended, and after this time, the woman did not leave. However, 2 months ago, the employee took time off work due to chills, and they had a lot of work to do that day. The saleswoman explained that they had already sold most of the goods, and there were no buyers. But instead of getting into the situation, the man simply fired the employee, not wanting to pay her more. The woman was driven away without even paying for what she had already worked. The situation seemed worse than ever, but suddenly, she noticed that the tax avengers were not sleeping, planning to deal with the chaos that was happening within these walls. Also with them was a labor inspector. This matter interested many specialists. It looks like there will be no less work. As soon as the tax inspector entered the office, the owner said that they showed up without warning. Jae-hyun then explained that when there is a risk of evidence being destroyed, an inspection can be carried out after the fact. This attitude greatly angered the head because he is not some kind of bandit, but a law-abiding citizen. However, this still had to be clarified. The main character hastened to introduce himself so that the man understood the seriousness of the matter. There was a fight coming up. It was like a duel between two boxers, and it was necessary to win this fight by knockout. The man said that his annual income is only $300,000, which is barely enough to pay expenses. The young man had numbers on his side as well as his devilish intuition. The man thought that he had outsmarted everyone. According to the papers, 4 people worked at the store. Problems will arise if there are more, the boy subtly said. The owner was not particularly clear on how the number of workers concerned the tax inspector. Even though this was only the first case, some tricks had already been learned from books. In just 1 day of observation, the guy saw more than 10 people. If the salary is only $300,000, then the payment of all these people there exceeds this amount. Where do other funds come from? Colleagues observing the way Jae-hyun worked saw him as the embodiment of Phoenix Wright. The more the owner spoke, the more nuances the main character noticed. The battle right now was similar to his solo performance. The knockout was that even after paying the full amount on time, the store owner will not be able to get away with it. When the numbers above the attacker's head disappeared, the main character realized that he had completed his mission completely. Having completed the case, the guy's colleagues talked about how exactly he was able to get into the investigation in the first year of work. A lot of people were interested in this question. It definitely had potential, but how good it was right now was hard to say for sure. When they asked the guy who was supposed to be his partner, he couldn't answer anything concrete. But before the guys had time to complete the theory, they greeted their star. Jae-hyun returned back to the office. Everyone was so interested in looking at the newcomer monster up close that they literally bombarded him with questions. The only question our main character answered was how exactly he got to this place. They called him crazy if he went against his superiors, but they were glad that thanks to him the structure became better. The guys were also interested in whether the guy would be rewarded this time for his services, since he easily solved the problem alone. Of course, there was no award, but the director of the department ordered the whole team to get together and have dinner somewhere. The director's card was like a one-piece. Everyone wanted to get it at least once, but only the most worthy got it. It seems that no one expected such generosity from the boss. When he was remembered, a chill ran down the man's spine. In the evening, the whole team of investigators went out to have a delicious dinner. They had to get to know each other better because they would have to work in pairs. Everyone was happy to finally relax with company. For a long time, each of the employees worked, returned home, and then went home. This evening was dedicated to the newcomer because it is unlikely that their boss would ever be generous with another such gathering. The girls seemed interested in our Reaper from the tax department. They were curious about how things were going. However, the guy was so amazed by the taste of the food that his partner had to answer for him. A familiar man was walking behind the guys. He was carefully watching those who were having lunch there. The man decided to pay for the table of the team of investigators, notifying the manager of the establishment. The amount was relatively small for the company, about $500, but everyone was very grateful. True, these people's gratitude looked a little different. They did not want others to pay for them, especially if they had a boss card. The man realized that this was because of the entry on the card. Then he offered to pay in cash. But experienced workers did not want to receive bribes, so they said so directly. The main character asked his partner if this was happening by chance, but the answer was disappointing. Lee Bong-han was the one who worked opposite our guys. He wanted to pay in order to build a friendly relationship. The man's face seemed very familiar. Jae-hyun very persistently tried to remember where he could have seen him before. After a few tens of seconds, the main character realized that it was this person who fired him from his job last time. Out of anger, even the powers of a psychic awakened in the guy. He bent the spoon, even if it didn't turn out as impressive as the mob's. The next day, the main character decided to check if there were any strange things behind his previous boss. There was some premonition that not everything was as simple as it seemed with tax accountant Lee Bong-han. The man was still working at Tae-il's company, even after quite a long period of time. Previously, the guy got a job with them in the company. After being drafted and serving in the army, it was an excellent replacement for part-time work in a warehouse. Tae-il is a fairly well-known company engaged in trading in the field of kitchen utensils, mostly tableware. Previously, their work, although not difficult, was remembered for many problems, and since then, almost nothing has been heard about them. The young man performed tasks perfectly, not refusing to help even other employees, and then he was invited to work at the company. He was brought in as a member of the public affairs department, and the guy who invited him put in a good word. Back then, the manager didn't seem like a fat hog from Minecraft yet, so he was happy to work for him. At first, the work seemed just great, until he learned about corruption within the structure. After this, the guy did not plan to turn a blind eye, quickly disclosing all the information to the authorities to solve this problem. Quite tired of thinking and worrying, the young man leaned back. It seemed to him that something was happening. Perhaps this was another tax evasion, despite the fact that the vice president of the company was recently arrested. There were only two options. Either the young man's powers failed, or something not very legal was planned and he should have intervened in it. No matter what it was, the guy couldn't sit idly by even if he had virtually no information. During lunch, you wondered whether the main character would eat, but from all these tactical games, his hunger completely disappeared. True, he asked to leave him some because he had a battle planned. Then his partner asked with whom exactly. Right now, the main character had to fight with the company he previously worked for. Tae-il aroused a lot of suspicion. Already in the director's office, he was talking about the company. The man was interested in whether the young man knew about short-term loans. Thanks to hard study and a bit of luck, the young man was aware of everything. It was through them that the illegal payments were made. With the help of these loans, you can hide paid bonuses and pension benefits that were paid illegally. Taxes were paid even in advance, but no one could know where so much money came from. An investigation had to begin. But before that, Director Kim reminded that the guy's enemies are not the people of Korea. You should be careful and calm. When the main character called the service directly, introducing himself as a tax official, he asked for some documents. He planned to obtain documents from the Board of Directors' resolution on executive bonuses. The person Jae-hyun contacted did not have the rights to work with this information, so the young man was redirected to the head of the department. The same manager answered the call. Park and Chol was right now on the same phone line with the young man. The young man asked for all the same documents, at the same time recalling the words that he heard before his dismissal. The main character introduced himself fully. As soon as he heard the guy's name, the manager immediately relaxed. He was surprised that that same young man had become such a big shot. Apparently the world is a small place, since fate brought him here again. The main character reminded Pooja that he only had 5 minutes to provide the required document. Park thought that Jae-hyun was in too much of a hurry, but the boy only said that he would not repeat the request again. The anger of the head of the park department increased with every word of the investigator. It seemed as if he was about to burst. The partner was surprised by the guy's aggressiveness. Usually, of course, he is passionate about the process, but remains with a cool head. 5 minutes later, the main character called Tae-il's department again, but Park was no longer so nice to talk to. He began to openly insult the main character, not intending to fulfill the request sent. Then the upstart was tucked into his belt that a tax investigation against Tae-il would soon begin. The Reaper's lightning will strike everyone who evades taxes, sooner or later, but it will definitely happen. You were surprised by the reaction of the department head, because if he can afford this, he definitely has some aces up his sleeve. The guy not only did not doubt it, he was absolutely sure of how difficult this matter would turn out to be. Meanwhile, at the main headquarters of the Tae-il Corporation, it was no longer as calm as before Jae-hyun's call. The director was dissatisfied with the park because they had recently been inspected, which means, why would the inspection happen again? Then the head of the department said that previously the investigator had been his subordinate. The man was very angry with Park. Another employee who had previously met the guy in a restaurant asked the boss not to shout because this would not solve the problem. The director asked how long the inspectors had been conducting investigations. Previously, this was done by another department. But now their boss is very shrewd, so he quickly gained the right to do what he thinks is right. Everyone recognized Inspector Jaehan as the one who ratted out the vice president, but only Lee Bonga was happy about the new experience in his career. However, the fact that the guy has connections with the company can play into their hands. The guy can come over to their side. The head of the department, Park, asked that this task be entrusted to him, but the director reminded him that he had one last life left. If a man screws up again, he will face not only a millennium of pain from the tax office, but also dismissal. The next morning started off wonderfully. Good weather and the main character anticipating a crushing victory. While the guy was standing at the bus stop waiting for the desired train, a girl approached him, asking if his name was Jae-hyun. This was the same girl who tried to ask him out for drinks while working at Taeil. Her name was Kim Joo-hee, even though they were literally enemies now. But still, the young man was glad to see her. They began to communicate. The guy tried to answer questions evasively, but maybe he always did this way. The girl still worked in the same company. She was curious if the main character himself had found a job somewhere. She was worried that after that scandal, the young man would not be hired for any job because he had distributed internal documents. Kim Joo-hee's words struck the young man because he had not done anything like that, and according to the head of the department, he was fired for another reason. Park himself spread the rumor about this, but Kim Joo-hee understood that the main character was not the type to do such things. Even if it was offensive to him, it could serve to defeat the corporation. Now it was clear how they solved this problem and informed other people about it. It turns out that he is now branded. Walking between the workers, the main character behaved proudly, but his partner did not understand why everyone was whispering. This warm welcome made the guy a little tense. He was interested in why they were looked at so askance. But the main character asked his colleague not to pay attention to those who help criminals by hiding their atrocities. It was worth concentrating on what they came here for in the first place. Otherwise, it all made no sense. Kim Joo-hee herself was surprised to see Jae-hyun in the office again, although she would not have even taken it seriously until that day. Lee Bong-hai hurried to meet the tax officer. He remembered that they had previously met in a restaurant and asked to follow him. While studying the documents provided, the inspector listened to the explanations of one of the department heads. Even though the guy wasn't a veteran yet, it was obvious to him that everything had to be done in a hurry before the check. They planned to follow the letter of the law, but also wanted the guy to talk to the CEO in person. The main character decided to agree to the offer, despite the fact that they had a lot of work to do. They were led to the right office, but Voss didn't understand what was happening. He was already turning into his namesake from Headlights Edge 3. Following the main character was a real madness, especially in those moments when he walked into the enemy's lair without doubt. All the key figures in this case were gathered in one room, including the general director and department heads. The CEO was not interested in formalities. He recalled that the guy had previously been part of the Tae-il family. Not intending to dwell on the issue for too long, Park brought a huge amount of money in a suitcase and put it in front of the guy. The situation was very tense. Voss was very worried about the decision that the main character would make. The general director was sure that now he was in no danger, because who in his right mind would refuse so much money? Then the main character took a pen out of his jacket. It glowed bright red. No one could understand what was happening. A little later, the young man explained, he wrote down everything that happened, starting from the moment he entered the CEO's office. It seems that everyone in Tae-il underestimated the young man, believing that he was just an informer. Then the guy himself will show what he is capable of. The hidden camera recorded every word. This was excellent evidence against Tae-il, allowing the matter to be quickly resolved. The general director was outraged. He asked if the inspector thought they looked like criminals. However, the main character said that they are not criminals yet because he is only diligently collecting evidence of their illegal activities. The partner asked if Jae-hyun was bluffing, but no, the pen really recorded everything that happened here. The director reminded Park that it was he who started all this. Besides, he wanted to figure it out. Now is his finest time. The evil head of the department began to threaten the main character, but even the behavior of the employee did not make the young man waver. He advised the manager to stop this because it was not possible to talk to a government representative like that. Not wanting to put up with this, Park decided to start a fight. He was not good at them, but now in his opinion it was the only way out. Then Voss himself intervened, asking him to stop. Otherwise the consequences would become much more serious. Having prepared in advance, the boy recruited one of his colleagues to capture what was happening. Now there was a witness that Tae-il couldn't reach even if he wanted. They should give up. The main character decided to figure it out like civilized people, so he waited for an explanation. The debt of the head of the park department amounted to about $200,000. It was a large amount, but not that much. But his boss played to the fullest. Owing more than 3.5 million, they no longer had a chance. When another boss, Lee Bonga, entered the room, he was amazed at what was happening inside. His debt was high. At the moment, the attacker will have to return about $2.7 million. The guy had all the information in his hands. The time for victory only gradually became closer and closer. The deals with Busan and China drawn up by the managers were suspicious, but Taeil's bosses wanted to get out. Those documents provided earlier were only fabricated, but the young man had an official document confirming their violations. The director ordered Lee Bong-han to explain himself because he had to do everything in the best possible way, as he had promised before. In addition, if the payments were made before the agreement of the directors, then they are considered excessive. Their leadership is like a guard with a shot in the knee from the game, The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. Lee, in charge of the bureaucracy, planned to add personal accounts to a separate list, but something went wrong. The more the main character spoke, the more the villains thought that they would end the game with a game over. The dispenser of justice provided more and more evidence that the Taeil Corporation was evading taxes. Lee was confident that thanks to his experience, he would be able to justify himself, because from the main character it is clear that he is a complete beginner. Then Jenhin said that they had learned very well how to prepare for the inspector's arrival, but they were not prepared for his arrival. Not wanting to lose, Lee Bong-han decided to go on the offensive, saying that the law had no role in this matter. Talking about some traditions and even attempts to defend himself, the man continued to maintain a lost cause. But one caustic answer from the young man quickly changed sides. He planned to continue because that was not all. Illegal loans to employees, violation of payments, and much more. All this pierced every manager with lightning. While Voss's acquaintance was watching this show, his boss approached him from behind, dissatisfied with the fact that he was shirking work. Then, when asked, "Why aren't we working?" the guy showed the phone where the newcomer and you were collecting taxes. As soon as I said this, a whole crowd of employees gathered around the phone. They all wanted to see Jae-hyun in action. When the guys found out that one of the directors of the company was the one who wanted to pay for them yesterday, they were very angry. Even if the newcomer didn't hear them, they wished him good luck and asked him to finish everything off with a signature move. Evening came. The disputes in Taeil's management did not stop. The general director continued to scold Park. Over the 17 years that the guy has been working here, he has caused a lot of problems for everyone. The head of the department was even ready to take the blame. Then, hearing Park's words, the director asked what he could do if he didn't even complete one task. Having also inquired about what ideas the Turbo Pig had, he only continued to apologize for the problems presented. The idea came from tax accountant Lee Bong-han, but the boss also had complaints against him. He also only has one attempt. The man's plan was to contact his friend to the prosecutor's office. The only option that could save them from this difficult situation was to tell a plausible lie. We are transported to a cinema. The main character is watching a movie about cowboys. A man in a stylish hat says that he is the sheriff here. The bandits, who have taken a woman hostage, ask the guardian of the law whether peace or a system will rule on these lands. Without hesitation, the sheriff from the film chooses peace, defeating his opponents as quickly as if Kirito was undergoing a test. The main character did not even suspect that any problems might arise, because the case seemed already closed. The guy's phone received a call from his friend Lee Sung-yeon. He was curious why they were calling him. The man was amazed at how far the main character had come. It was not even expected, but a small problem arose. The blonde warned that behind the guy's former employer, there was a much more influential person than the one he would move. Director Lee had quite serious plans for Jen-heng, but before he could prove that the man was not mistaken, the main character will have to cope with a lot of difficulties that await him along the way somewhere in the shadows. The next day was much calmer at first. Good weather and condition. Readiness to give it my all. Work was in full swing. The young man and his partner Voss continued to do paperwork. Then our boy decided to dispel the silence by asking his friend if the Samson office was such a good place. At such moments, it becomes clear that the main character is just a first-year student, because everyone knows about this place. This office is among the top 3 best in all of Korea, so it's everyone's dream to get there, even someone as small as Hana. It is simply impossible to get into this world. The amount of taxpayer income is also incredibly large. Suddenly, one of the employees ran into the main character's office. They had come to them from the prosecutor's office. This was unusual because they do not do any ordinary things. Then what did they forget here today? Khan asked the director if everything was so bad, but the man asked him not to worry. 2 detectives came, most likely because of a call from Lobong. The first of them, the one with glasses, was called Han Sung-pil. The second one standing behind was called Min Ja-hyuk. The director asked how they could help the detectives. One of the employees of the prosecutor's office turned out to be an old acquaintance of the head of the department. They were not very happy to see each other. A request was received. The investigation department staff found charges, and the Seoul Tax Department contacted them. The investigation department will have to find out all the details later, but for now, detectives plan to arrest 2 employees. To make things clear for his old friend, Min Jak-hyuk decided to name those who needed to be taken into custody. However, the head of the Bomsang tax service himself decided to intervene. He did not like the fact that the detectives were organizing some kind of concert. To make an arrest, a serious charge must be filed, such as conspiracy, bribery, or conspiracy. An employee of the prosecutor's office asked whether the investigators could not accept the charges. He was very angry with the man's behavior. Given that the detectives did not follow due process, this outcome was inevitable. This fight was much more intense than the confrontation between Elle and Kira, 2 sides who knew the laws. The detectives did not plan to adhere to the pattern of behavior and treated the head of the tax service with disrespect. The main character was very worried, because earlier he had promised not to get into trouble, but now there were people on his side. Now the young man is not who he was before. Now he has the opportunity to make an impact on something. Prosecutor's office employees are discussing the investigation department on the street. They understand that they need to stop it in measles. It was strange because they were all covering one newcomer. This is not often seen in this field. Is he really that good? In any case, only his exceptional abilities could cause such an attitude, so a good plan was needed. The guys are surprised by how those whose 2 managers were convicted of breaking the law and demoted remained so arrogant. The bespectacled man suggested that blame could be avoided by simply shifting the responsibility to one of the company's employees. But there was no time to think about such things further. They still had a lot of work to do, so they went. Once inside, investigator Khan, who had been observing the couple, reported everything to the director and head of the investigation department. Everyone was on their toes. There were rumors that someone would be fired again. That's why everyone was walking around asking what and how. The main character sat quieter than usual. He asked for forgiveness from his colleagues, saying that he should not have done this. Then Chief Kim approached him with a question whether he had violated the principles they had previously discussed. Full of confidence in this, Jaehan replied that he did everything according to the rules, without even thinking about violating the main principles. The man told him that since the guy had done nothing wrong, instead of apologizing, he should think about what he could do. In addition, Kim said that while the main character is working under him, it is worth asking permission before asking for forgiveness. Then the director decided to look into the situation on his own. He asked what Tae-il had done during the month. The main character spoke about all the evasion of VAT and taxes that they knew about. The head of the department was sure that Tae-il was the real criminals. They broke the law and must be held accountable. Earlier, the guy mentioned how he had worked there before. The director was interested in how often he had to deal with corruption there. Then the young man said that in that place most issues were resolved only this way, both personal and higher level. Department head Kim asked if there were at least a few reliable leaders there who could help. After thinking a little, the young man replied that among everyone there were 2 who planned to leave the company after 3 years of work. These people practically did not work, receiving high salaries and not worrying about anything, because previously the law did not bother them. The director knew the right people, so he promised to look into the issue. They were probably set up in order to somehow respond to the inspection. Prosecutors will come soon, so Khan and the main character wanted to pack their things before they were taken away from here. The boss didn't think this was a good idea, because Jae-hyun is only a newbie. He shouldn't be given to these people. However, after thinking for a long time, the guy decided to go with the prosecutors. The management did not understand him, because these are not ordinary police officers. How can one even talk about such things so simply? Then the main character tried to explain his logic. In any case, sooner or later he would be forced to meet them. If you go there, you will probably find clues that can help you find the answer and solution to this problem. Sitting at his workplace, Kim thought about what was happening. He looked stern, but was a very kind person. The arrival of the prosecutors greatly alarmed the guys, but the man tried to calm everyone down as best he could. Later, it was announced that the 3rd group would be completely disbanded. This was another serious blow. One of the detectives said how small the chances of winning this battle are, but by continuing to resist, they are only adding to their problems. Anger and sadness forced the man to consider his options. He did not plan to sit idly by and watch how everything collapsed. The next morning, the young man went to the prosecutor's office. For him, it was like opening Pandora's box. There was practically no idea what to expect from today's trip there. The situation would be very problematic to resolve. Having gained confidence, the main character went inside. People were already waiting for him, so it was worth hurrying. The corridor seemed endless. There were so many doors in it that if he had not been given precise guidance, he would definitely not have reached the one he needed. There weren't as many people sitting inside as the guy expected. He still had a chance, so he didn't even plan to give up. Going inside, the room seemed like a jungle to him. He had to give it his all, and then maybe something would come of it. Each of those sitting here had a debt. Perhaps it was not so big, but everyone starts with something small. Among everyone who was in this room, there was definitely one of the accomplices in the organized setup. Finding the right person was not difficult. Apart from him, none of the debts reached an amount higher than $100. Everyone in this office acted as if the main character did not exist at all, as if he were some kind of empty space. Everything had definitely been thought out in advance, so the guy wasn't trying to do anything dangerous or stupid. One of the prosecutors who had previously come to his office asked the guy to follow him to question him. When the guy asked what exactly he was accused of, the man spoke about his opinion. He believes that the guy exceeded his authority. Then, in response to this, the main character said that he adhered to all the rules, and one of the detectives was also with him. Doubts about the guy's words arose for the reason that he previously worked at Tail Corporation, and according to employees, leaked data. The detective was sure that this was definitely a planned revenge plan. The main character advised him to write a book for him. To be honest, the man also believed that there was something wrong with the corporation, but the guy's actions were definitely planned. In addition, if the guy previously worked in a company, he should have been familiar with the internal kitchen. The detective believed that his IQ was about the same as Senku's, so he set traps, waiting for the prey to fall into them. At such moments, it was worth speaking only the truth. Then the man with glasses would definitely not be able to do anything else. But the man made a fatal mistake, which cost him the initiative in this battle. Now it's Jae-han's turn to ask questions. The young man's words struck harder than any spear. He also noted that the man probably knew about the attempt to bribe the main character. However, this bird was not the guy's opponent. His main problem was the hidden cheetah that had just approached. The man introduced himself. His name was Ha Sung-pil. He wanted to know why the main character was pretending not to know. The detective's age was about the same as the boy's, but he spoke so confidently about other people's atrocities. Before providing evidence that the young man himself was embezzling funds while working at Tae-il, the boss recalled the bespectacled man. There was no need to even look at the folder casually thrown onto the table. Everything was too obvious for that. The management planned to hang up all the money spent on payments, getting Jae-hyun out of the way and getting rid of the hole in the defense. The situation was very complicated. It was necessary to take a step back to understand the story behind everyone's actions. Ha Sung-pil said what the prosecutor wants, for the guy to kneel down and beg for mercy. Perhaps if the main character does this, they will turn a blind eye to the incident, maybe not. If you look at the degree of confidence of the detective, the order was given by someone above the management. There were few such people. Then, using his ability again, the main character directly told the man about his suspicions. It looked like Ha Sung-pil was involved in conspiracy and bribery, and the detective panicked greatly. It was not difficult to guess the amount of the bribe, but banknotes are not suitable for such things. Probably a new car. The excitement of this kitten is visible to the naked eye. Now it's time to strike a counterattack, like Miyato Ichiro. Considering the man's reaction, the guy said loudly that his suspicions looked very realistic. However, Ha Sung-pil only became angrier by asking Jae-hyun if he understood whose attention he had attracted. The main character asked whether the people who stand behind the prosecutor should be careful. It's so easy to comb them out. In turn, the man continued to only increase his anger, saying various terrible words towards the young man. Then Ha Sung-pil grabbed our boy by the tie, telling him that the brunette had forgotten too much where his place was, promising at the same time that today will be the last day when the main character creates chaos around himself. Angry, the man himself told about everything. Tae-il enlisted the support of the former prosecutor general. The bespectacled boy reminded his colleague that such things should not be talked about, because it was incredibly dangerous. The situation turned out to be more serious than the main character himself thought, and it looks like he won't be able to get out of it unscathed. Ha Sung-pil framed a huge number of people with his story. The guy with glasses hated him to himself, and the prosecutor himself realized how big a mistake he had made, and besides, he was far from a stupid person who heard about it. Before Ha Sung-pil could say another word, a man in a suit walked into the room. He wondered what he was proving right now by holding Jae-hyun by his tie and doing it so hard. The friendly version of Virgil was named Sun Benim, and he came to pick up the protagonist from this building. The silver-haired man suggested that if things continue like this, Ha Sung-pil will definitely hit someone, and they don't need that. The prosecutor himself tried to justify himself, presenting the incident as a simple misunderstanding. And the main character was surprised at the power of the person who came to his aid, even if the person walking under the prosecutor general is afraid. Sun Benim himself came here to ask Beosam's office for cooperation, but Ha Sung-pil is doing something strange here. It became obvious that since there were no surveillance cameras here and he had a chance to get out, there was no point in playing this game anymore. The main character pushed Sung-pil away and asked him why he was sighing so heavily. Then the man explained, he simply has no words because this is far from the end. But does Jae-hyun himself know about it? Before leaving, our boy asked Ha Sung-pil to pay his taxes on time, otherwise there will be an attatada. The words of the main character infuriated the prosecutor. He was ready to burst like a balloon. Sun Banim exhaled. It looks like he came on time. The end could happen at any moment, so they were very lucky. The gray-haired man asked his friend not to worry because he was Ji Hyun-suk, now his ally. Deciding to talk over a cup of coffee, the prosecutor took the young man to his office. They had a lot to discuss. The secretary approached the main character and whispered a request in his ear. She asked him to thank the prosecutor. Sun Banim did not have time to find out about the news in time, but did everything to appear at the prosecutor's office as quickly as possible. The main character was curious and his fate depended on it. He asked his colleague to share information. Sun Banim liked this approach. In short, suddenly the man was tasked with protecting one young man. To be completely precise, it was an order from the chief prosecutor. He asked to help Jae-hyun with this situation. When asked who exactly they were talking about, the main character did not expect to hear a truthful answer. He was even ready for a joke. However, the man simply said that it was someone much higher than them, and then continued to drink his coffee. At the beginning, the main character thought about who this mysterious superior supervisor might be. But there were too many options. The only obvious truth is that not only the main character has a patron. Moreover, these two work in completely different structures. The prosecutors are supported by other prosecutors. The same story happens with the tax office, but the reason is that these usually unrelated institutions simply exist separately. And now they're like yin to yang. It turns out that all this time everyone covered everyone, but it was a real secret. Before starting over, Sun Banim asked not to think too much about it. They just have to do their job. The gray-haired man asked what exactly the main character was accused of. Then he listed all the options mentioned. The situation turned out to be a little complicated due to the stupidity of others, because if everything was so, it was worth contacting the prosecutor's office. The main character said that he had never embezzled money, and Sun Banim believed him. It seemed like the truth. Having also revealed that Ha Sung-pil plans to interview people, Jae-hyun wondered whether his savior could be trusted. The man suggested that in this case, the weak points of the department would probably be looked for. It was important to know whether the leadership there was reliable. After testing Sun Banim with his ability, the main character noticed that there was no number above him, which means he is pure. But even so, trusting completely would be too big a mistake. It would be worth playing much more secretly. Without insisting that the guy trust him, the gray-haired man handed him a business card. He offered this option. If any of them needed help, they could call at any time. At this moment, they need to cover each other, so providing help will be more effective than quarreling or not communicating. Ji Hyun-suk was an important figure on this board, but due to the lack of information, it was difficult to know how much. The main character's partner was completely wilted without him. Like Morty without Rick, he was doing paperwork and the completion time was being postponed. Then Jae-hyun came and handed him some instant noodles, hoping that at least this would help him cheer up. The brown-haired man assumed from the boy's face that everything had not gone so badly, so there was no need to worry about him for now. Before eating, they should have gone to the department head's department. Jae-hyun had been waiting there all day. The department head's anger only intensified with every hour he spent alone with himself. The director tried to support his employee, while Khan meanwhile was talking about what needed to be done next. Han also asked about Ji Hyun-suk, but now he only caused a positive impression on the young man. The situation became much more complicated, so the director had to tell the main character what was happening. There are 3 tax departments in total: Seoul Regional Commission. The second one is the Central District Commission. And also the last third, the head of the investigation department, Min Chi-ho, no one knows, but the young man is already familiar with him. Apart from these 3 departments, there is also the sword of the district commissioner. His name is Su Sun-ju. Han then decided to clarify if the Seoul branch had a reason to attack them. After waiting a little, the director said that the bone of contention is the third force in this fight. There is no battle between the branches. The Tail Corporation simply bribes the Central Tax Office without interruption, so it has more opportunities. In addition, the chief is also familiar with the sword of the district commissioner, which allows him to put pressure on their entourage from 2 sides at once. Now the main character realized the seriousness of the situation in which he found himself, because everything fell into place. The only thing that seemed strange was such a serious approach to firing just one inexperienced employee. Everyone was interested in why Han Sung-pil was so angry and said too much, but the guy couldn't tell the truth. Now they had to decide what to do next, because a serious enemy was hanging over them. Since they were affected by 2 sides at once, measures were needed against both and as quickly as possible. The head of the department was familiar with the district commissioner's sword, so he knew that finding an approach to it would be extremely difficult. A little provocation and it became obvious that Ha Sung-pil received a bribe. It is possible to win back from this. The man also mentioned that the former prosecutor general was behind them. It was clear that this was someone with power. Then Khan turned to the head of the department and told him that it was time to do something real for them. It was worth checking this information because if it turns out to be fake, there won't be any problems. While studying the reports of the financial exchange, a team of inspectors noticed strange things. It was obvious that someone had given a bribe with information. To move forward, the men needed to find the owner of the exchange and proceed from this in further research. The owner of the company was Tae-il. Even if they had evidence, no one would allow this investigation to be carried out. A short time later, evidence was found that Ha Sung-pil was bribed. It all turned out to be a deep hole. Bribery was obvious, but they did not have the authority to investigate such cases. This quagmire was much deeper than the Plague City from the first part of Dark Souls, so it was not an easy quest. Remembering his gray-haired colleague, the main character asked to entrust him with obtaining permission to investigate. I couldn't even believe that a newcomer to the field already had enough connections to do something like that in their situation. Ji Hyun-suk was the prosecutor whom the guy met at the police station, and he helped him out. You can trust him. It wouldn't be easy, but trusting the guy's judgment was the only thing their investigation department could do. It was strange to see the prosecutor fighting against his own colleagues. Khan assumed that this was due to personal reasons. The first step will be carried out according to the main character's plan, but you should be careful. Any mistake can be fatal. The next morning, the guy's partner had breakfast. The day started well. The guy was finally able to get some sleep. However, before he could take even one bite, Jae-hyun threw his jacket on his head and called him with him. They had to work. Before leaving, the young man gave his partner several instructions. The worker, who had not yet woken up, did not understand this fuss. You asked if it was urgent, then the young man said that if this is not done right now, the department may disappear. The main character planned to catch a taxi, so he will wait for Watson from below until he finishes printing out the required form. The morning vibe was completely ruined. There was no time left for a sandwich, and now they are leaving on business. Meanwhile, the enemy is not sitting still. Ha Sung-pil received a call from an elderly woman as the best district lawyer. She insisted that one level 7 inspector be out of her sight and praised Sung-pil for his quality work. Worried greatly, this ancient treasure hunter looked truly pleased and promised to give it his all. Last time, for helping an elderly lady, Ha Sung-pil was able to receive shares worth $700,000. What will he get now? This unknown person was an extremely important asset to the prosecutor. He was her sword and had no plans to leave his position. Meanwhile, having returned to the building, the man noticed some kind of commotion. Everything was somehow too lively. All these people stood in front of Ha Sung-pil's office, but no one went inside. It was strange because he was not the only one sitting there. It seemed to him that this was the prize that he was supposed to receive from the mysterious old lady. If it was her, then giving the reward on the same day that Ha Sung-pil gave his word was quite generous of her. Such a high speed amazed the imagination. Just imagine and everything as if you were in a fairy tale. However, this was just a mirage created by Song-pil's consciousness. The actual state of his office was very difficult. Confidently stepping forward, anticipating receiving a prize that he could not even dream of, the man ended up going broke. All this time, the main character, his partner, and Ji Hyun-suk were waiting inside the prosecutor. It looks like it was a bad end for Sung-pil. The prosecutor's lunch hour lasted too long. They were already tired of waiting for him. They had a very important conversation. Realizing that Jae-hyun could not return unprepared, the bad guy was about to sneak away. But the gray-haired man intervened in time. Everyone knew exactly what Ha Sung-pil did, and as a prosecutor, he should have been held accountable for it. Those present here gathered only to collect a gift tax from the man. The data was in hand without having any registered work before. It is unlikely that the man was able to accumulate 700,000 just like that. The main character persistently asked the prosecutor about where he got the money. They had evidence. Jae-hyun did not plan to contain his rage. He directly said that Sung-pil was disgracing the name of prosecutors like Ji Hyun-suk. Now the man was threatened with the blade of justice. He would no longer be able to turn to higher powers. He should have explained where the money came from. Then Ha Sung-pil decided to choose the word lent as his answer, but nowhere was it indicated where the money came from. Was it a private loan? And if so, who gave it? But the guy who looked like Garina didn't plan to answer the questions. Ha Sung-pil did not plan to tell anything, but the young man was a tax employee. He still had to know some things. Then the young man suggested that the debt was taken from the Tae-il company. This was a hit in the bullseye. After thinking a little, the prosecutor realized that the main character came here. Knowing full well what exactly happened and how it happened, there was no point in denying it. But even so, the man tried to prove that the money he borrowed was needed, so he borrowed it, which is illegal here. Ji Hyun-suk decided to help a little. He said the following: if Han Sung-pil wants to be fired, he can continue to remain silent. The prosecutor had no choice but to listen to everything the main character had to say, otherwise he was guaranteed to lose. In addition to the fact that Sung-pil paid for the shares worth 700,000, they were soon registered, which led to their significant growth. A couple of days later, the received shares were already worth $2.3 million. How did the man find out about their registration? Not realizing that he was checkmate as soon as he entered the office, Sung-pil continued to make excuses. The concept of chance does not exist when it comes to 2.3 million shares. There is too much luck in his story. Then the boy took up his ephemeral blade again. Preparing to inflict punishment, he turned to Prosecutor Ha. The guy decided to wait a little before crushing justice on the one who broke the law. He was interested in where the 700,000 were taken from. Then Ji Hyun-suk stepped into the game again, holding out a closed folder. The information stored inside indicated that the man had taken out a loan from Tae-il's company. Now it's impossible to attribute everything to a coincidence. There was no chance of winning, so the man decided to take Jae-hyun's tie again. Ha Sung-pil's behavior discredited the name of the prosecutors. Ji Hyun-suk himself took on the education. He showed his opinion about this man. Now there was nowhere to go. Prosecutor Ha had led himself into a dead end. There was no more solution, so he lost. Before this bad boy was taken to the investigation room, Hyun-suk approached him and revealed some information he knew. The main character could boast of a good memory but not hearing, so he could only make out the name of the one who wanted to remove him. Ha Sung-pil was nothing more than a wooden doll from Lies of P. The boy's real enemy was called Baek Hyo-yeon. She held the post until the appointment of Lee Song-yeon. In an attempt to escape, they stumbled upon a large fish. Ji Hyun-suk warned his friend, "They have angered the nest, now you should be much more careful." Meanwhile, the Seoul tax office received one very unpleasant call. The director called employee Min Jak-hyuk, telling him to stop studying the submitted documents and compiling a countdown. Something serious happened. The prosecutor's office became aware of the bribe. The woman was also the boss of this person. She warned the boss that the main character should not be underestimated. It seems that he is not as simple as he seemed. While doing his job, the man talked with an elderly woman who came on commission issues. The amount that the woman was paid was too high. It was a burden for her, so she asked for help with this. The options offered to the woman were not suitable. Then Kim, whom we knew, stepped in. At that time, he was not yet the head of the department. Noticing that his grandmother was having difficulties, he decided to come to her rescue. She received too much commission. As soon as the young man just looked at the paper the woman brought, the brunette easily determined what exactly could help. He also explained exactly what to do next, so that the commission was calculated as for one person, and not according to the average. Even then, Kim was kind. He didn't work as hard as he does now, so the circles were barely noticeable. He really didn't like it when his friend Min Jak-hyuk did this, because he could help this woman. However, at this time, the brown-haired man was infuriated by the fact that his colleague made him a laughing stock in front of his grandmother. The future department head asked if their job was to help taxpayers. Then his friend answered in the negative. Their job was to tax others, not to help them understand the system and legally pay less. In the present time, Kim's old friend was seriously angry, realizing that he had missed a chance to teach his longtime acquaintance and enemy a lesson. He was so angry at Kim Young-jung and Ja-hyun that his veins tensed up just like that meme of the guy with the red face. It was unclear why the main character always interferes in everything. His presence really creates a lot of problems. At that moment, even Min Jak-hyuk began to wonder who the main character really was and what he could do. When the guys finally dealt with Ha Sung-pil, they were able to allow themselves a couple of minutes of rest. Stopping by McDonald's after a hard day at work can actually be very pleasant. I can say this from my own experience. Prosecutor Ji Hyun-suk was surprised at how well the main character was doing. You couldn't say that he had almost no experience. Now, having done one thing with the main character, the Herald of Rivia was finally able to understand why that person chose Jae-han. However, when the man said these words, the guy did not feel relief. Again, the mysterious someone behind everything. There was a possibility that the Eminence Grease was his longtime acquaintance, CEO Min Cho-hee. It may be difficult to have complete confidence in Ji Hyun-suk right now, but as long as he is on their side, he will really be useful. Behind this chess game, there is someone much more influential than their department team initially expected. This drive and mystery make the young man's heart beat more and more often in anticipation of the next adventure. Then the guy turned to his friend, asking him what those words meant about Ha Sung-pil. The gray-haired man stopped drinking his iced latte and replied, "In this mess, Sung-pil is just an ordinary pawn. There are many like him around. Probably their main opponent, the queen of the enemy half, is Baek Hyo-yeon, the prosecutor of the Seoul Eastern District. The former district attorney was so dangerous that absolutely any action could be expected from her. What speaks more eloquently about this woman is not the stories of other people, but the list of real estate that she owns. Not a single house, car, or anything else is registered in her name. This also applies to her children. Ji Hyun-suk advised the guy to get under the woman's parents because if you go against her, then perhaps that's the only way to find out something. The main character asked his interlocutor if he thought that the guy would be the only one who would oppose Baek Hyo-yeon. All the guy can do is just attack, but it's not for nothing that they say that attack in turn is the best defense. The problem was that if you attack first, you will receive a response several times stronger. You hesitate, and you will be slammed by their attack. The woman used relatives to buy and store shares, doing it with someone else's hands, so everything was clean behind her. Ji Hyun-suk's description was quite accurate. The woman's behavior spoke of her danger. She did not look at other people's feelings. The woman's driver was carried away by her conversation and did not notice the stopped car, ultimately causing an accident. Due to the man's carelessness, Baek Hyo-yeon's purse was a little dirty. It was clear that the dangerous lady didn't like it terribly. The man asked to spare him because he really didn't do it on purpose, but the woman didn't care. She did something that will remind the driver of the mistake he made for the rest of his life. As soon as she lost her temper, the man was sure that she would pull out and devour his soul without even blinking an eye. It seems that Baek Hyo-eon's power was extremely great. How could the young man cross her path? Meanwhile, Jae-han and his partner Voss set off on a new case. Now their path lay in the Menhan Law Agency. The guy's partner did not believe that after the prosecutor's office they were going to such a place the next day. It won't be long before people think the two of them have nerves of steel if they endure such adventures. However, the boy's words did not reassure Voss. He said that if they continue to work together, his partner might forget about his nerves. But the brown-haired man was interested in why his boss didn't say this at that moment, while the boat was on the shore and he could have refused. Returning to her office, Baek Hyo-yeon was very surprised because she had guests and she had not made any appointments for today. Everything changed as soon as the employee mentioned that an auditor and a civil servant from Byumsan had come to see her. The witch couldn't remember everything at that age, so it took her time to weave all the names into one web. Ha-sung-pol also disappointed the former district lawyer. I'm seriously tired of paying attention to him. Why there are so many of him? The woman allowed her guests to be let in, but they decided to make a surprise, so they were already waiting for her inside. Baek Hyo-yeon was not against the conversation. There was hardly even a shadow of doubt on her face. She was too confident in herself. The main character understood that he could not give in to her, no matter what. Otherwise, he would be crushed in an instant and swept away from this field. Looking at the woman's head, the main character froze in horror because she had embezzled almost $8 million. This was an absolute record, but she was not someone who would not cover her tracks or allow an investigator to find something due to her carelessness. The auditor didn't even plan to get up. He was wondering if Baek Hyo-yeon understood why they came to her office today. The woman could only guess at the amount of face cream. She didn't even know who came to her today. A little later, Jae-hyun said that the situation looked sad, especially when just 2 days ago she wanted to grab him by the throat. But it would not be so easy to catch a reaction. The woman continued to freeze, trying to find out the reason for the visit. The guy understood that he was unlikely to be so significant that someone like her would remember the attempt to fire him. However, he knew something that the woman could not forget for sure, because this man had previously helped her so much. The main character threw Ha Sung-pil's compressed business card onto the woman's desk. The woman looked at it and reluctantly picked it up. Even though Baek Hyo-yeon was trying to hold back her emotions, her pulsating veins made it clear how angry she was. The woman did not understand who the main character really was, and why there was a business card of one of her pawns. The guy decided to be ironic, asking if the woman really didn't know. Then he decided to tell her. Song-pil, whom Hyo-yeon treasured so much, was recently eliminated by the main character, after which the woman's face made her mood clear. Then the young man added that he came not only for this reason, he also wanted to discuss some other points. Information could be obtained from the woman herself. You just need to convince her that they already know everything. Of course, the guy was bluffing a lot, but even getting a grain of information would be useful. She is a secret figure. Without hiding her real face, the woman said that she remembered the main character and directly asked him whether he could ultimately be the winner. Hyo-yeon's reaction showed how easily she bypassed the trap left. It would indeed be difficult to sue her. She explained to the guys that no matter how many pawns they remove, new ones will always come who will always listen to her. Whether it is another Sung-pil or perhaps someone else, as long as she is the head of the prosecutors, hardly anyone will want to go against her. If the animals that the young man had met before were strong but defeatable, then this woman was on a different level. Even though the main character came here full of confidence, everything turned against him. Such an opponent is unlikely to be tough for him now. However, what the guy saw in this office was what he expected to see. This woman is not a monster or a demon, she is the same person. Baek Hyo-yeon was sure that there would be no one in their country who could withstand her in battle, so the young man had to calm down. She's like the final boss of the game, whom you meet briefly at the very beginning, as it's a painstaking climb to get to her. The woman suggested that Jae-hyun is about 30 years old, at which time he should work hard, but now he is going the wrong way. Not wanting to listen to this pretentious nonsense from the elderly lady, the guy decided to utter his catchphrase. Does the woman pay her taxes on time? It was obvious that if the battlefield had been Hyo-yeon's territory, the main character would not have been able to take a step. But what would happen if the territory was his? The guy was sure that the woman owed a lot of debt, which meant that he would crush her in his field because there he was incredibly confident in himself. The stronghold shook slightly after this statement. It seems that even someone like her can be approached accordingly. The only thing for which Hyo-yeon herself believed that the young man should be given credit was for his lack of fear. All you had to do was catch the hint that the woman was the initiator and the guy had completed his mission for the day. The main character insisted on fair play because the prosecutor and also the lawyer, even someone like Jae-hyun, would be beside himself with anger. As soon as the young man's lips closed, Baek Hyo-yeon exploded. She screamed so loudly that she was probably heard even in the department. She ordered the tax office staff to leave her office immediately, which they did, although not winning the war but certainly winning the battle. Returning back after this military expedition, you asked the main character whether it was necessary to do this. The guy's behavior towards a person who owns a medium-sized business was a little cruel. Then Jae-hyun asked his partner not to be naive. She wouldn't blink an eye and use all her power. He did not plan to lose this war. He was not Obito to declare and then turn out to be an outsider. The main character was driven by a desire to rid this world of those who break the law, which is why he became the Reaper of the tax service. These people thought too much of themselves and succumbed to evil. They need to be called according to the severity of the law, regardless of their position. So as not to worry you, the young man promised him to provide protection not only to him, but to the entire department in case of anything happening. Again, we hear this question, who really is the main character that he is so confident in himself and not afraid? Watching another intrigue that someone is spinning, we meet a still unknown young man. He helps to go against the main character. The villain's accomplice was asked if Jae-hyun would ever give up, but this guy confidently says that he won't. It turned out to be the guy's partner. He was warned what would happen if the main character didn't warn you about the ending to which he was heading. A mysterious voice asks the guy if he can stand it if something unexpected happens to Jae-hyun. Vasa wonders what exactly could happen to him. Then the stranger suggests that the young man can leave Aincrad on his own. The more the person on the phone tells the protagonist's colleague, the more worried he becomes about what is happening. Even if the call was recorded, no one can do anything about it. Just a couple of calls and the entire department will be cosplaying garlands. Realizing that the young man got involved in a game beyond his strength, he tries to imagine how difficult it will be to figure out everything that might happen later. Considering how strongly guilt affects the investigator, it is not so difficult to use suggestion on him. Not understanding what to do, the guy simply sat down and cried. He did not understand why he became part of this process. Continuing to collect information about his main enemy, Jae-hyun each time came across a dead end and was forced to look for new paths. It was too early to reveal the truth now, so the guy preferred at this stage to simply wait for the next move. An order from support from above said that the young man should cooperate more closely with the prosecutor's office. Then he would have some chances. The young man was working hard, so he didn't immediately notice when Kim approached him. He asked him to step away for a minute. The boss scolded the guy for his recklessness, because even if he got away with everything, he couldn't act too recklessly. Going under this woman was a terrible decision that will lead to a lot of problems, and this will only be the tip of the iceberg. The guy tried to explain his position. If he stopped making noise, he would quickly be removed and replaced with a loyal pawn. Then the boss, already blushing, explained that if the guy goes to the police and tells about everything, at least I can protect him. All these secret actions were much more dangerous, but if Pereno made the information public, everyone would be in danger. The safest and most effective way, found by the main character in the process of analysis, is to become the only target for her. The boss was not against taking revenge alone, but then if the guy retreats, the blow will fall on those whom he does not want to involve. However, our Reaper was ready to take full responsibility upon himself, because it was he who started this mess, which he has been clearing up for so long. They still had some chance of winning. Probably the woman's assets were evading taxes so she could be brought in. Kim could not call the main character anything other than crazy. This idealist literally declared war on the greatest people of the country. The man couldn't understand how someone like this man ended up among his employees. It's hard to believe. Kim exhaled and said that he knew about the list of Baek Hyo-eun's property that was lying on the guy's desk. If a guy wants to dig further, no one should know about it, and he should also clarify what kind of responsibility he will take. This news hit the guy hard. His boss said he should have found his place, and when he merged with it, start moving. Voss stood on the street. His condition was similar to that of a guy who plays Civilization all the time. During the break, the young man and his partner talked about everyday topics, the weather, and other similar things. They got along great. If it didn't concern the crazy antics of the main character, they had a lot to talk about, and they proved their reliability. The young man, in pursuit of elusive justice, began to worry about certain things and wanted to share it with his friend. This was a rather unexpected request, because almost all the time the main character behaves coldly and is only involved in work. Voss was even interested in what exactly made his boss feel so depressed. Then Jae-hyun decided to tell him. He was worried about what happened. He had one friend who seemed very reliable. However, he was there only to learn about the weaknesses of the main character, not to say that they are serious, but the fact itself. And in the end, this man shared the young man's weaknesses with his enemies so that they could destroy him much faster. A little later, he asked you why his friend needed this. The main character did not know this. Perhaps he had never been his friend. There was one saying that Jaehyun hated, but it always turned out to be true. It sounded something like this. If you want to find out who your enemies are, start with your friends, because these people already know when you are weak. Hearing this, the guy fell to his knees and began to ask his boss for forgiveness. He was very sorry. He tried to explain his decision, but the young man's reaction was still disappointment. Even now, he did not have a friend. Voss has always wanted to be like the main character, but he doesn't have a tenth of the confidence that Jaehyun exudes. At that moment, the guy realized not only that his friend was only the one who would stand on an equal footing with him, fighting for his dream, but the main character also understood the fact that he had probably already lost to the laws of this country. The sky above the head of the young man and his subordinate perfectly reflected the situation that threatened everyone who was involved in the process. Jaehyun's partner promised to write a letter of resignation because someone like him shouldn't be around after he did this. Looking at Voss, the young man realized that he could easily be in his place. He is not just his elder. If the main character didn't have the support and the luck that smiled at him over a long period, everything would have ended something like this. Now Hook's words sounded completely different from when she said that it was almost impossible to defeat her. Watching someone demonstrate strength without regard for someone like the main character is incredibly painful and difficult. The guy understood his elder. Everyone can make mistakes, and probably someday the young man himself will make a mistake of the same importance. The main character reminded his partner of his words. He promised to provide protection to everyone in the department. To understand the seriousness of the situation, the young man asked his nakama to tell only the truth and nothing else. He was interested in whether you received bribes, but the young man swore that such a thing had never happened and would never happen. As soon as he heard this, the main character was able to overcome these negative emotions. He asked his partner to stand up. They still had work to do. The brown-haired man did not understand how one could forgive someone like him after such a disgusting and bad act. Looking at the eyes of the one who supported him, seeing himself standing on the bridge and planning to throw the textbook into the water, the main character could not resist such a cool opportunity to say something pathetic. I want to see what you are capable of. Meanwhile, in the company of the terrifying woman, the sound of a phone ringing was heard. Her Loki decided to call first for the first time. Hyoyeon wondered what could have happened if her informant decided to call first and did not wait for her to contact her. When they started telling her to stop these terrible behind-the-scenes games, she just started laughing out loud. The husband continued to ask his wife not to use their daughter-in-law's name to buy shares anymore, but she did not understand this prohibition. All the people on this stage are just puppets under the command of a woman, no more, no less, because only she decides how everything will be the next day. Those who do fall into its network can only silently observe how useful their name or basic capabilities can be. The woman was sure that all the people in her life were just toys, which means she could do whatever she wanted with them. Having already felt the taste of huge money, the woman could not believe that money could be earned in any other way. But before the woman could immerse herself in her puppet theater and realize how much power she had there, someone knocked on the doors. The chill auditor and the sad assistant, who was very worried about the influence of the woman and her threats, came to spoil the fun. Even the main villain was amazed by such impudence. It should be her job to ruin everyone's mood with her appearance. Then the main character reminded her that he had also warned her earlier that she should have listened and paid her taxes. Paying taxes fairly is the duty of every citizen, and despite his merits, Baek Hyoen is no exception. However, instead of fulfilling the request, the woman simply spent all this time bullying the elder. The guy made his signature move. The way back was blocked. All that remained was to go forward and win. It was obvious that everything would not come to an end until one of them was able to stand on his feet. This did not bother the young man. The woman seemed to be beside herself with rage. She was even ready to increase her damage like Sven's ult. Despite the woman's confidence in her elusiveness, the guy was ready to catch her using tax laws. The guy quickly figured out the principle of storing a woman's currency or property. They had a lot of information. The hunt for the big beast continued. The data the guy received could ruin everything, so Beck tried to take it away. When asked where all this came from, the guys only had to run a recording from a pen. Her relatives were chess pieces and eventually overthrew the queen. The lawyer and the prosecutor hardly had any chance of escaping the hand of the law, so she could prepare. You can tell if an animal is caught in a cage by looking at its eyes, the only accurate indicator that allows you to determine this. The woman was further confident that someone like the protagonist was not capable of causing her significant harm. Even at such a disadvantage, seeing the pen that was writing everything down, the old lady continued to threaten Jae-hyun. The young man didn't like how much the woman underestimated him, because she shouldn't think that the guy was afraid of her. With every word the main character said, more and more veins began to appear on Baek Hyo-yeon's face. She was definitely very angry. The guy took all the lady's words about him as compliments, and then asked her if she was looking over the fields from her tower. After all, what is outside a woman's field is very aggressively opposed to her, and no intimidation will help here. The final prepared document was like pulling a trigger, a precise and accurate movement that puts a bullet on it. The trick was to convince her relatives to worry about their situation. They were the first to escape from the sinking ship. Neither the property nor the money belonged to the family. They were simply written down on them. Then they were given a convenient opportunity. Trying to get out, he and the main character began to play catch-up, because the document in his hands was like a fatality. All Baek Hyo-yeon could think about at the crucial moment was the money she earned. How sad. Soon the guy will return to the office and give the woman's family to pay taxes for her, because they control it all. Until the end, Baek Hyo-yeon could not believe that she had been tricked. She decided to make a call to make sure of this. Everything turned out to be even worse than the woman expected. Everyone around her responded to her hatred in kind. The main character and his not-so-faithful partner stood proudly, waiting for their victory anthem. The phone call that the woman had so requested was finally completed, and now the investigation could begin. Regardless of what exactly the woman does, she will definitely not be able to escape now. Such is her ending. The woman had a choice between losing everything or being punished for all her offenses that had been committed for so many years. The guy did not forget to take documents confirming the property for the woman. Now she can choose the path she will take. By putting her seal on this sheet, she will be able to keep all her property, but without a doubt she will go to the scaffold. Baek Hyo-yeon considered this some kind of deception, but the guy only gave her a chance to choose her fate. Who knows what will be better? Not wanting to give up the wealth she had collected throughout her life, the woman decided not to let go of anything and take everything with her to hell. Without any doubt, the old lady accepted her fate to put her seal on the deed of ownership. The guy thanked the woman because now she pays taxes on time, which means she can be officially praised for this. A considerable amount had accumulated, and the young man advised her to treat her relatives with respect. Having won a crushing victory, the main character hurried to leave the office. The plan was simple but risky. The main character was worried that it would not be possible to change the owner without the help of the prosecutor, but everything worked out that way. True, in any case, this puppet factory eventually fell, because over time everything will be confiscated on its own. This evening felt much cooler than the ones they had to endure while working endlessly. Walking along the embankment, the young man decided to ask his partner what it was like to feel revenge, having seen everything with his own eyes. It was hard to believe. Even though Shoten was present throughout the entire stage, he couldn't be sure that it was all over. While his partner was trying to find the right words, the young man said that he plans to move on. This is just one of the steps. The guy planned to continue to use everything available to him in order to remove this garbage from their country layer by layer. And even if he has to do it alone, the guy will raise his integrity to the level where he can become a coach. But if at the same time someone like Voss is nearby all the time, it will be much easier to achieve some significant results. Soon Baek Hyo-yeon was arrested. Her property did not even contain a collection of Pokemon cards, a waste, not an investment. The people sitting above were amazed that ordinary inspectors managed to catch someone like this woman. The general director of the central office came to his acquaintance and asked Chi-ho-min why his messages were not being answered. The news about Baek Hyo-yeon seemed simply amazing to the head of the central tax department, one of the best moments in his life. The director's friend also seemed interested in the sword he had picked up earlier. It showed promise as being pure and true to his ideals. This man's sword was Ji Hyo-sung, who played quite a significant role in the capture of the witch, so we can say this is their victory. It looks like these two will be a reliable duo, one attacking, the other following and supporting. A perfect combination of working relationship, skill, and efficiency. Each of them is definitely strong, but together they are unbeatable. The number of bad people is not decreasing, so it was too early to leave them alone with this mission. Chi-ho-min thought they should just keep an eye on them until these children were old enough to become their replacements. Catching all the vile people sitting at the top has been the guy's dream since ancient times, and now they have come close to it. It was also not worth applying too much force until they were ready to stand against the whole world, stumble a little, and they could be attacked. At this stage, according to the leaders, nothing mattered, because they were just bait and shields. Watching the triumph of his subordinate, Kim could not understand how everything ended so quickly. It's sad that the main character left his boss's wing. It's unlikely that he himself had such a high-profile case in his career. He was interested in whether the guy was preparing something else, in secret from everyone, wanting to crush someone from the brace. But now our main character didn't have anything like that on his mind, not yet. Before the guy could return to his duties, Department Chief Kim had one more thing to say. Watching the guy's every step and carefully studying the situation between the tax authorities, he and the director came to the same conclusion. It is said that Chi-ho-min, the director of the first investigation team, has a rather rough sword. Could it be that this is about our Jae-hyun? Without the ability or desire to hide, the main character admitted that he was a sword in the service of Chiho-ming. Kim has long suspected that the guy draws strength from the CEO's reserves. This would explain a lot. The boss asked whether everything the guy did was an assignment from higher authorities, but the main character hastened to convince his boss. The young man needs the help of someone like Chiho-min in order to administer fair justice to those who deserve it. Therefore, each of the steps taken was the will of Jae-hyun, and not anyone else. Of this you can be 100% sure. This, of course, explained a lot. But in someone like the main character, one could see the real sword of the director of the first investigative unit. For ordinary people, a CEO doesn't mean that much, but for those who worked in this field before his arrival, the man became a hero. Like the Almighty, Min Chiho broke the hostility of 200 tax parties and divided them into 3 branches that still exist. Now Tae-il's company and Baek Hyoe herself have come to an end, but from this day on, the young man must report on all actions. Otherwise, his boss will have a heart attack and they won't even pump him out with all their strength. The evening after everything that happened, the main character, as usual, planned to spend with Hen. They planned to have dinner together with buns to go. All the adventures are finally over and they can continue to work. Now they are the same as Alfred and Batman. They are whispered about in almost every department. This worries his partner a little. A call came to the young man's phone. He was curious who was calling him because it was already late. The guy urgently needed to run. It looked like the call came from someone very important and not waiting too long. The main character said goodbye to his friend and ran. Some important matter was waiting for him, which he could not talk about yet. This time they went to that restaurant again. Jae-hyun was happy that he lived to see this day. The guy was a little late, but Lee asked not to apologize. The director would not come again. He had too much to do. The man shared how surprised he was to hear about the results the main character was able to achieve in such a short time. However, the young man saw little merit in this achievement, mainly because he had reliable support. The food, as always, lifted the young man's spirits. He had been really working hard lately, so he was glad to just sit. The guy got the job done on SSS. Prosecutors and lawyers are tough opponents if they cross the line. The achievements gained during this time were more than enough to move to a more prestigious tax department. Without trying to hide his desire to work together, the man invited the young man to join them in order to increase efficiency even more. However, the guy decided to refuse. Lee wanted an answer. The guy was worried that now was not the time to hire. Not much time had passed since the young man became a civil servant, even if his experiences amused the man. The young man decided to postpone the transfer for a while. He should finish what he had already started, and then move on to the next level. It was the main character who started the changes. Now he wanted to see how they would reach the end. Lee accepted the option that suited the sword of Chiho-min. He would wait as long as necessary. The young man also wanted to ask if he could take someone with him to the new department. Lee liked the idea. It meant that the guy had finally found his man among everyone he could trust. He may have stumbled once, but the way he reacted and behaved screamed that Hen was trustworthy. Despite his age, the main character was quite insightful, which was annoying and impressive at the same time. The next day, the guy's condition raised many questions because Hen had never seen him so tired. The guy finally realized what hickeys are like when they get out into society. It's not something you want to repeat again. To help Jae-hyun out, his partner decided to go into the office and pick up the necessary medications that were supposed to help the young man out. While the main character was stealing the warmth of the side window, he noticed a very beautiful girl. Looking closely, the guy managed to see her face, but then he realized that he could not check whether she was evading taxes. You had to get closer and check, and besides, she was wearing a government uniform. Having quickly opened the car doors, the guy slowly reached the stranger. He wanted to make sure. As soon as he called out to the girl, it became clear that she was crying. She did not immediately react to the guy. The beauty's name was Yoo Ji-hen. They previously worked in the office together. She knew the guy very well, because he is quite famous. She didn't want anyone to see this side of her, and she was even more upset when the main character saw her like that. The young man wanted to help his new acquaintance and asked why she was upset. Then the girl shared her problem. The taxpayer was the owner of an office where various applications were developed. Yoo Ji-hen sent the invoice to them. She believed they had changed the area to residential after commercial use. The guy examined the scent evidence. It quickly became obvious that they had simply cleaned the room. The girl didn't know what exactly the guys from the office were doing, but in 4 years they hadn't made a single sale. The guy understood that in front of him was a good girl, fully worthy of becoming a waifu, but something still bothered him. He asked for the address of the office so that he could independently examine how things were, and at least help Yoo Ji-hen.